Goodness me. I forgot to put myself on. Well, hello, everybody. Happy Sunday and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the beautiful world you are. I hope you're all having a fantastic weekend. It's been raining here, which is always a blessing. So I'm always grateful for the rain. And a big hello to everybody, Lisa D, Charmaine, Nicole, Nico, Truth. Good to see everybody. Nice to have you. And we, of course, are on again for part 4, but I'm wondering if it's not part 5. Why is it? I think it's part. No, it is actually part 4 with JR Sweet tonight. Very, very compelling testimony for sure. And if you have not watched JR's previous interviews with me, please do so because we're doing it in stages. Tonight we'll be covering his time on the mountain, governmental assassinations, left-hand path. So stay tuned, get your chai or whatever it is, your beverage of choice. Put your feet up and send us good vibes because we always need it when these shows are on for interference and, of course, for our amazing survivor and overcomer and thriver, JR Sweet. JR, it's always so good to see you. Welcome back. How are you?
Good. How are you, Chantel?
I'm good.
Good.
I always, I must say, wow, our last show, I felt my heart broke for you, I have to say. And there's just one thing I want to say out of that show that I really feel compelled just to mention. You spoke about there was one time where you literally died, and you went to the space where you met with the souls that you yourself had unalived and a few others as well. I think that is such an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful that you had that because I think out of everything, that would probably be the thing that makes sense on some level to you. And I'm sure, as a healer for 30 years, I've also worked with people who've had near-death experiences. And I can't say, of course, yours is the same as theirs, but what I've learned from people who've been down, who've had those experiences, they come back with something that they never had before, or something within them. I'm going to actually reframe that. I'm going to say something within them has awoken that wasn't awake before. And I believe that that's probably why one of the big reasons you're sitting here on these platforms and sharing in the way that you are, because it's very raw, it's very real. And I can imagine it cannot be easy for you. So again, thank you for what you're doing and for what you're sharing. And we are extremely grateful to you.
Thank you, Chantel. Yeah, very well said. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely affects you, an experience like that. Yeah. When I go back, I want to be able to say I did everything I could. Everything I could.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. We're glad you're here, and someone seconding that. And it's nice to see the comments in the chat. Nicole saying, "Jara, so glad you are sharing." Okay, I'm just going to pop it up. Actually, it's just nice to see. Jara, so glad you're sharing your story. I read your book and blog. You're an inspiration to survivors, and I do agree with that.
Nice. Thank
And
you.
yeah. Quite a few others, yeah. But I know we're gonna aim for around 2 hours of your testimony today, and so I'm gonna say over to you. And if there's anything, I will chime in, but mostly I will just sit back and listen to you speak.
Thank you, Chantel. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here today. So last time we were talking, we left off on the mountain. This was after I had been selected for Pentagon level black operations. And so they started to use me for stuff after that. And so there will be triggers in this conversation just for people out there who need to be warned of that. There are usually triggers associated with these conversations for people who are survivors of satanic ritual abuse and the CIA's trauma-based mind control program. So just so folks are aware, you may need to have the conversation screened before you watch it or listen. So, and then
obviously, sorry, and I just want to say as well, it amazes me how many people tell me their children are listening to these conversations as well. And I just want to say we have a special 18 plus for these programs with reason, guys. So please, if your kids are listening, don't let them. It's not, they don't understand this yet. Obviously, everything is age appropriate. I think the dog agrees.
yeah,
I mean, everything is age appropriate, but yeah, please, not for kids. It shocks me every time someone says that to me.
yeah, not for kids, no. So we're going to start going into the mountain, which was a facility that I was taken to be part of a guard detail. And this was in a top secret government facility, the Trinity Mountain Underground Complex. And my uncle was taking me there. Where we left off last time was after I'd seen Leo, my uncle and I at that bar up in that building. And so we left there and we went to the airport in LA after we had dinner at that establishment. And we got on a plane from our helicopter, and it was a bigger plane. It wasn't a little one like my grandmother and I had flown down to California in. It was larger, and it was, my understanding is that it was an aircraft that transported people from LA to Area 51. And so it was an aircraft used for that, and it was in between flights. And so they had a little bit of time that we were able to utilize that aircraft, and we were taken to an entrance to the Trinity Mountain Underground Complex. So the Trinity Mountain Underground Complex, it was deep in a mountain, and I believe that mountain was Mount Shasta. And we went down in there, and I don't want to talk too much about how we got in there because that's something that I'm still gaining an understanding of, and I think I understand it very clearly, but until I've written that out fully, I don't talk about that. But I can remember we were down there and we met up with this individual, and he came to meet us as we entered this room. And everything was, there was a lot of concrete. It was a concrete under there, a lot of concrete poured, and a tunnel system. And this individual met us down there, and he was dressed in military BDUs. I don't remember any insignias on him, anything like that on his uniform, identifiers, but he was wearing a battle dress uniform, and he was armed with a submachine gun, an HK MP5. And he was glad to see us because they were short on people for the guard detail for that particular ritual that we were there to look over and guard. And so my uncle was with me, my uncle Gail Pooley, he was with me, and he was one of my key handlers really throughout much of my youth. And he was there with me, and we went with this individual, and we met with the CO. This would be the commanding officer of the guard detail there in the mountain. And the CO, he was at first glad to see us until he discovered that my uncle wasn't going to be sticking around for the guard detail. He wasn't going to pull duty on it. He was leaving me there to do it. And he had told me before that he was going to be there in the mountain the whole time. And then this was kind of shocking to me to be told that he was leaving. And the CO didn't like to hear that either. He got really pissed. These people would really scream at each other and just be really mean. And he just started yelling, and I'm not keeping this kid here. What are you doing leaving me a kid? And he said he had orders and he had to accept me there in the mountain to pull guard duty. See, I was younger than Chantel because I'd been cleared for a Pentagon level Black Ops when I was 17 before Dick Cheney left for Halliburton. It was like right before. And they pushed me through with some other individuals. And so I was young. I was 17 years old. I turned 18 later that year in 96. And the CO could see it that I was young, and he was pissed because he didn't want any kids being left around. They just looked at me as this damn kid. And so he had to accept me, though, because my uncle had orders that he had to accept me, that I was to be involved in this guard detail. So there's paperwork somewhere on that within some files. And then he had to accept that. But my uncle also told him to give me a firearm. Because we were in the mountain, and the mountain's a dangerous place to be in. And so he had to give me a firearm, but he really didn't like that. But they did give me a uniform to put on, boots, stuff like that. My uncle, he went with me, and I got geared up for it for my time there on duty. And when my uncle and I were getting ready, getting me dressed, he started talking about what he was going to go do. He talked about that to me. I don't want to get lost in the story here because my uncle said some things that were really interesting and that people should know. And so he said that he was going to go and he would come back. He said he would come back and pick me up, but he said that he was going to go to Bohemian Grove because at Bohemian Grove, Britney Spears was there, and they were working on doing something to her. And so he wanted to go be involved in that. And he talked to me about that for a little while. And thinking back, it's all really disturbing, but that's what was going on. And so we got me dressed, and my uncle told me where he was going. And then we went back and we saw the CO again, and that's when he gave me a firearm. But my uncle argued with him about it extensively. And in the end, he refused to give me any ammunition for it. He just gave me a weapon, and that was all. He wouldn't give me ammo. He said if I needed ammo, someone else could bring it to me. And so yeah, it was a bummer deal, and just all the way around. And so my uncle, he left, and I was stationed out in the tunnel system. And there was an individual like myself who was a trauma-based mind slave who came to take me out there because they really like to use trauma-based mind slaves for stuff like this because you can pull us all in. We don't remember the events of what occurred. We do what we're told. We're programmed for stuff like this. And so I started being taken back by this other guy, and he was a little older than me. And he asked me when we were walking, he said, why don't you have any ammunition? Why don't you have any ammo for your weapon? And I just said, well, the CO said I couldn't have any. He said, I'm not allowed to have any. And this guy was really bothered by that because he said the mountain was a really dangerous place. And you don't want to be in the mountain without some form of protection, because there was something in there, Chantel, some kind of being or entity. I don't know exactly. I know that we called it the slough, and I don't know if that's a military term or what that is, but that's what we referred to them as. And this stuff was all hard to process for me, because I just did what I was told. And so this individual, though, he called in the CO and said, why doesn't he have any ammo? And the CO said, no, I'm not giving him any. He still refused to. And so they argued about that for a minute. But then he took me out to this area in the tunnel system where there was a door here to my left, and it was a double door, I believe. And there were these stairs leading up to it. And I was positioned near that door. And then off over here, there was a doorway that led down. There were stairs that went down. And then in front of me, the tunnel just continued, but it zigzagged around. It wasn't just like this long thing. It would go and then it would turn, and then it would go and then it would turn. And so there were lots of zigzags and stuff like that. But I was positioned right there next to those doors. And this individual said, if you need me, you can call me. So something I forgot to mention is we did have communication devices. We had comms, we had radios. I'm not quite sure how it worked. If there must have been some kind of booster system or something, because we were deep underground with all these concrete walls. So we had comms, though. And so I was made to stand there for a while. I don't know how long I stood there. It was a strange place to just stand and be a part of. And there was that doorway right there to my left, and you could start to hear things coming from that door and smell things, and it smelled like pools or something to that effect. And after a while, it became a lot of screaming in there, and it didn't sound good. But you just dissociate.
What was the ritual that you were a guard for? Do you know what the ritual was that they were doing?
Yeah, we're going to get into that.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're okay. That's a great question. So I was standing there, and there was chatter over the comms. The CO would check in with everybody. And then we started hearing this chatter over the comms, and it sounded like one of the guards or something. And one of us started to freak out, and he was talking over the comms, and he was saying, do you see what's going on in there? Do you know what's going on in there? This is horrid. He started talking about shooting the place up and taking all these people out. And so he got cut off from the comms. He just went silent on his end. And then the CO, he started yelling at me because I was right across from him. I had to go through the ceremony, but I was the closest because of I just had to travel the distance across the width of the ceremony area. And so he said, get in there right now. I want you to go through those doors, and I want you to go through the ceremony. And then there's a set of double doors at the other side. I want you to go right through them. And then that's where he's at. I want you to distract him. And so I did exactly what I was told. And I did it very quickly, and I just opened the door. I went in, closed it, and then I started to run across this area. And there was a lot of pools in there. I tried not to look too much at that time because I wasn't supposed to be seeing everything. And I can remember running through, and there was water, and there was blood, and there was this pool to my left. And I looked over there, and I could see what they were doing, and it looked awful. They were eating a carcass of some kind, and they didn't look older, like, yeah, this is an awful memory. But I ran through it, and when I got to the other side, there was a double door, and I opened it, and I went out. And I was pretty shooken up by what I had seen and what I had run through, even being an active CIA mind slave. I was like, oh my, what on earth? And so I got to the other side, and I was just standing there outside the door, outside the ceremony, and this guy came out, and it was the guard that I was supposed to distract. And he thought that I had come over to help him. And so he greeted me and said hello, and I stepped down close to him, and we started talking for a minute. And he said, did you see what's going on in there? We have to kill all those people. This is an atrocity. And I just tried to calm him down a little bit, and then you could hear the other guards coming from up the tunnel on each side of us. And he heard that, and then he realized that I was there to distract him. And so I was really close to him, Chantel, and he took his assault weapon, he took his MP5, and he lifted it up, and he just smashed my head in with it. And there's this huge dent on my head, in my skull. It's all deformed right here because he crushed my head in right there. And I'd wondered for years, what on earth happened to my skull right here? And that's what happened, is that guy just smashed my head in. And it knocked me out. I can remember just him going up and bringing that thing down on my head, and my body just fell. Everything went black for a second, and then it's weird. I'm going to talk about some very strange things, Chantel, because my spirit was knocked out of my body. It was knocked out of it by the force of the blow from that individual. And I watched my body fall right in front of me onto the ground. And I watched the two other guards tackle this other guy. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was all so traumatic. And I just went right back into the double doors, back into the ceremony. I think part of it was curiosity, and I wanted to gain an understanding of what was going on in there. But I was also getting away from that other situation. And it's difficult to explain. But I went into the ceremony again. And so I'd been knocked clean out of my body. Our bodies are this vehicle, this shell we travel in this world in. And our spirit can become separated from that. And I went into the ceremony, and this is when I really saw everything that was going on very clearly, because I went in, and it was a large room, and it was long, and it was wide, but not greatly wide. I don't know how to put a number to it exactly. And there were pools over here, and they were shallower, and they had what looked like the younger people in over here. They were male, and they were probably like, older teens, mid-teens, something like that. And to my left, there were more pools, and there were several, and they led up to a elevated area where it went up and into this space up above. And there was this slide that was coming down from that upper level down to the pools. And so My dog is barking. I think it's my wife. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, but there were also, I want to add all these columns. And so this room, it was as though it was all stone, this old looking stone cut in. And there were these huge columns that looked like something you'd see in Roman architecture. Very large columns helping hold up the ceiling in there. And then all the pools, and then the upper area. And then there was this slide coming down. And there was blood everywhere, and it was just mixed with water, and the pools were red with blood. It was all just this bloody, disgusting thing. And I was watching that, and I could see the people in the pools and what they were doing, and they were eating what looked to be like infants, babies, essentially. And they were just eating them. And I went up towards the elevated area to see where this was coming from. And they were putting babies on this slide and letting them go down to the pools down below. And I went up above, and there was a big white room up above that was all white. And there were a bunch of women in there that had been giving or were giving birth. And then they were sliding these children down the slide, and these men were eating them, freshly born and alive. And I was really, it was traumatic, even in spirit form, to see these things. And I realized that I didn't want to become lost there, because if you are knocked out of your body and you lose it, you could be lost. And I didn't want to be lost. And so I, especially there. And so I went back to where I had come into this room, and there was, my body was gone. This was where that individual had struck me out in the tunnel system, and my body was gone. And I became concerned. I was like, oh no, where did my body go? And there was a guy there who was guarding that area now, but only one guy, and everyone else was gone. And I said, this is not good. And I didn't know how to get back to where my body would have been taken to. And so the only thing I could do was follow my trail back the way I had initially come, in order to get back to where I thought they might have my body, which would have been at the area where we met with the CO, which was kind of like their little command center room, you could call it. And so I had to go back through the ceremony again. And I can remember going right back through it. And that was the last time I went through it. And I got to the other side, and I went it down to where I had been before. And there was that other tunnel, the stairs that went down, Chantel. And I remember looking at that tunnel and thinking about going down there, but I didn't want to do that. And so I was like, no, I left, and I went back the way I'd come, back to the command center area. And my body was there. They had me up on some gurney or table or something, and I was just laying there, and my head had been all smashed in. And I knew it would be painful. I went and I looked at my body and my head, and the CO was there. And he actually, before, when I've been talking to him with my uncle, he was such a jerk. And he actually seemed a little concerned for me. I finally felt any ounce of empathy from this man. And that was interesting. And I could see my head was smashed in, and that it was going to hurt really bad. And I was actually mad. He was on the phone, He was on some kind of phone, and he was talking to my uncle about what had happened to me. And they weren't supposed to wake me up until a certain time because they could use, what is it, smelling salts or something like that. I think it's called smelling salts to wake you up. But I didn't like that. That's a horrible way to wake up with those things. And so I didn't get back into my body right away, Chantel. I can remember I went back to this locker room where I'd gotten dressed into the uniform I was wearing. And I just sat back there. And weirdly enough, I sat in a toilet room stall. And I just sat there in the stall. And I don't know for how long. And I just thought about things because being out of my body the way that I was, I could actually think without the mind interrupting my thoughts, because our mind is a physical component. And I was away from my mind, the mechanisms of it, the mind control, all that. It was just me. And I was able to just think. And I was really mad. I was really mad at my uncle. I was really mad at the CO. I was just mad. And after a while, someone came to find me because going back to my uncle, who had been killed before these events, had died of cancer. He came to find me because I was in need of help, because I was not in a good way. And I should not be hanging outside my body like that. And so my uncle came and he told me to get out of the stall, and I came out and I met him there. I realize how strange all this may sound, but this is just what happened, and it's all very interesting. But he told me I had to go back and I had to get back into my body. And so he finally talked me into it, and I went back. And you have to touch your body. Anyone out there who's ever blown out of, or from a concussion, a blow to you, if you ever end up out and you have to get back in, you have to touch your body. You have to touch it. And so I touched it, and I immediately was back in my body. And I wasn't fast enough to come fully conscious before the CO hit me with those damn smelling salts, but I ended up getting woken up and coming around. And then I was taken, when I finally got moving enough, they changed me back into my street clothes. And then I was taken back to the way that I'd gotten in. And the CO, I can remember when he sent me out of the door and was headed towards the plane, he was just so glad. He did not want me dying in the mountain under his detail, under his command. He didn't want it. He didn't want somebody dying and having to deal with that. So I went back out to the plane. I can remember walking over to the plane, and my head just hurt so bad, Chantel. It just hurt. And I walked to the plane, and the two pilots were there, and I just looked at them and I said, "Where's Gail? Where's Gail?" Because I was pissed. I was still pissed. And they just said, we don't, he's going to meet you somewhere. Somebody's going to meet you. And they finally got me on the plane, and then they flew me back to LA. And then in LA, I had to get back on a chopper. And it hurt so bad putting the headset on in that damn chopper, because my head just hurt. But I had to put on the headset, and then they flew me back over to the Disneyland park, and we landed in the same spot we'd taken off from before. And I got out there, and my grandfather was there. He was there to meet me. And so someone did meet me. It was my grandfather. And by this time, the sun was just barely starting to come up there in Anaheim. And we just walked right through the park. We didn't try to take any back ways or anything like that. We just walked right through the park. And I talked to my grandpa, and he said, we talked about who those people were that I had seen in the mountain, because I was like, what in the hell's going on, Grandpa? What was I doing guarding that? That was really bad. What was all that? And he told me it was an old ancient group. I suppose you would call it something. I don't know exactly what you would call it. This group that was a very evil group, and it had survived for centuries. It'd been around for a very long time. And there were people who had tried to get rid of it, but they were unable to. And he told me that the agency and the US government had decided it was better just to work with people like that than to try to destroy them, because you could never get rid of them. They always survive every time someone had tried to kill them all off. And so I don't know exactly who they were. I remember they looked Asian, like people from Asia. I don't want to say a country because I don't know, Chantel. I don't know who those people I saw in the mountain at that ceremony were. But that's what I saw there. And then I was made to escort my grandmother. My grandpa looked at my head and he looked at my eyes. And he just told me I had to keep going. I had to finish the operation I was involved with, which was now back to transporting my grandmother safely back to Nampa. And so I had to go pick up my grandma at her hotel. And I had to drive through all this. And my head just hurt so bad. And then my grandma and I, we finally got back. But one thing about this whole trip, is they'd always hit you with a stun gun and hypnotize you to remember to forget these things. And I had told my grandfather when he was looking at my head, I told him, I don't want you hitting me with the stun gun. I don't want you doing that. That can happen later, because I was really thinking about all these things that had been going on in our family. I was really mad at my Uncle Gail because of what he had brought to the family in the project. And I was mad at my parents. I was mad at the government. I was just angry. But I was able to start to process it, even just a little bit in my life. And I told him he wasn't allowed to hit me with a stun gun. And he said, okay, I will grant you that. And he gave me the stun gun, and he told me to give it to my grandma, and she had to do it to me before we got back to Nampa. And I said, okay, we can compromise with that. And then I went and picked up my grandma, finally got her out of bed. And then, she got up. She slept for a while. I went to pick her up, and I just sat there. I wasn't supposed to fall asleep. They didn't want me falling asleep. Something to do with a head injury, and you don't want to fall asleep. So they wouldn't let me sleep. So I just sat there in her room in this chair and waited. And then she finally got up, and she had no empathy to what I had been through, or having my head smashed in. She didn't really care. And so I drove her back to the airport there in LA, and then we got on our plane and we flew back over to Nampa, and she hit me with that stun gun on the plane. Before we landed, she hit me with it. And I'd given it to her and told her what my grandfather had said, that she had to do that at some point, and before we got back, and she hit me with it. And then I was made to forget about all those things, Chantel. I drove my grandma back home, and it was all just very confusing. I wasn't allowed to keep the sunglasses that I bought in LA. You remember how I talked about that in our last interview? So I bought sunglasses at the airport when we'd first gotten there. Well, I wasn't allowed to keep them because that would have caused my conscious mind to question, well, where on earth did these even come from? And so I had to put on my clothes again that I had worn to my grandmother's before she'd made me change. And I was made to give her those sunglasses. And those sunglasses would sit in her kitchen drawer for years. She put them at the back of one of her kitchen drawers, and that's where they would sit for years. And I can remember later I would find them even years later and say, Grandma, what are these doing in here? Whose are these? And she would say, those are somebody else's, and sometime they'll come back to get them, or something to that effect. And it was always very confusing. So, but that was my time in the mountain, at the Trinity Mountain Underground Complex. And I still have that scar to this day. Sometime when I'm able to, I will go and see a doctor about it. It doesn't bother me, but once in a while, sometimes it will get to where it hurts, but I don't want to talk about that too much. Sometime I'll get it looked at professionally, because my family, they all knew about it. My uncle learned about it, and he just told me to wear a hat, and don't hit your head on anything. And
one thing that is so clear to me is just the lack of compassion and the lack of empathy.
Yeah.
To listen to what, the way you're explaining what happened that night with these people and what they are doing, it's on another level evil. I mean, that is, and it's interesting what you're saying, because I remember when I was interviewing Beverly Rhodes as well, I don't know if you're familiar with Beverly Rhodes. She was actually a guest on my channel for quite a while. She was the ex-psychic to the South African, the psychic to the ex-presidents of South Africa in the apartheid era. But she was also, she came from the UK, and she was handled by Patrick Daniel Rhodes. Now, if you look at Cecil John Rhodes, who is Rhodesia, they were the original colonizers, literally, of Africa.
Interesting.
And so you can imagine what they did, right? Absolutely horrific. And if any of you haven't watched those shows, I really want to recommend you watch the shows with Beverly Rhodes, because she was also taken in to be a vampire nanny. And as a kid, she had to watch in these vampire houses where these vampires were feeding off willing feeders. I mean, women would come and what have you and offer themselves for these guys to feed and stuff like that. And then they would feed on her as well. And so I was wondering if because I think what we've spoken at length about the vamps, and they are of another, I guess, dimension, planet, whatever, but are living here. And it's similar to what you were saying, like places like the Mormon Church. She mentioned the Mormon Church, and her Patrick Daniel Rhodes, whatever he was, they would actually create spaces for these vampires to feed, because they are of the oldest on the planet, and apparently they control the planet. The vampires actually control this planet. And so they are always willing feeders, and they would literally feed off kids. Like, she has marks on her arm. She explains what happens, like there's an aesthetic type thing that comes out of their mouth, but it's got to be sexually stimulated. And then when the teeth go in, it's like they shoot out. You actually don't feel it because of the numbness that the saliva causes. But she's explained that quite interesting. I mean, very in depth, right? But it's interesting what you're saying about this off-world, wherever these I don't know. I've never asked what they looked like. I just assumed they looked ugly as hell. I mean, no one can be pretty when they're doing shit like that. Um, but I'm interested to know if you think that those could possibly be the vampires as well, that are eating. She's never ever mentioned them eating kids, though. She spoke about people that were transitioning, and it took about 18-month period, but it had to be a slow process of transitioning, and not everyone could transition, and a lot of them died actually whilst transitioning because it's such a powerful. I mean, you have all the power then. They're the most powerful on the vamps. I'm not sure if that relates anything with some of these people you were talking about.
I don't know the answer to that either, Chantel. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. But I don't know the answer to that. I didn't get to see any of them. Well, I didn't get to. I didn't see any of them. So,
Right.
yeah,
How interesting.
that's
Well,
interesting.
someone's asking, and I mean, you can or you can't answer. Depends. Does on you? Depends on you. Does JR have any evidence that his family might not be fully human? It does sound like a terrifying lack of basic human compassion. But I also think, I mean, I think that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not human. But, you know, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know that many of these kids, like JR, they are traumatized even while still in the womb. So they have the main thing is to kill the empathy gene, if you want to call it that. So they're going to do whatever they have to make sure these kids do not have any empathy whatsoever. So of course you're then raising a society of psychopaths. So a psychopath is a human being that has lost compassion. Yes, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not human. What do you say about that, JR?
Yeah, they do seem like monsters, but yeah, I don't have any. I see them as being human. They're just very inhumane.
You've
They're,
never had any reason to believe. It's not like they shape shifted or anything in front of you, right? We occasionally hear. Did you ever come across anything like that? Like any of these high level guys that you were dealing with, and women, of course, that they changed shape or form in any way? Because we hear a lot about that. I'd love to actually hear your take on that. I mean, as far as these things are concerned.
no, no, I saw people dressed up in alien costumes, like costumes for things like being made to film porn or something. There might be people there that were dressed in costumes as aliens or something like that. But I've talked a little bit before about I have seen strange demonic things. Demonic, I would consider it to be a demonic entity. It's interesting you talk about vampires. I will tell you about this because you have interest in it. And I'll try not to take too long about it. But at my parents' home, before I started to remember stuff, we were visiting them one time. And this was after I was married. And I had our son and one of our daughters, maybe both of our daughters at that time. I'm not entirely sure, but we went to visit my parents coming down from the university. We were going to college at that time, and we came down to see them. And we went and did something. We went and ate somewhere, and then we came back. And when we got back to the house, we opened the door, but then everything just kind of stopped. This is all really weird stuff. And so everything just stopped. And there was an individual there at the house, and this entity or whatever it was, it dropped down, and then it was there, and it was the size of an individual and very dark, and everything stopped. It had the power and the ability to stop time, just to stop it like that, just boom, and everyone went unconscious except for my son. He did not go unconscious, and I can remember being accustomed to this strange being and understanding how dangerous it was. And I had concern for my son, but he didn't move or do anything. But this thing, what it wanted, it was mad because my parents were late on giving it its feeding. And so it drank blood from my mother, and it bit my mother. I believe it was on her arm, and it drank from her. And then I know this is all really strange stuff, but and then we went inside, then it left. And when it left, everyone became conscious and it acted like nothing had even happened because no one was even aware that this had even occurred. And my mother was like, oh my, what happened to my arm? Because she was bleeding. She was bleeding from her arm. And she was really concerned. She was like, what happened to me? What happened? And so she had to bandage up her arm because she was bleeding, and it was all very confusing. And I was dissociated, and I just smuggled that away deep inside me. And my son remembered it. He remembers it to this day. And my daughter can remember seeing a strange demonic thing at their house. And so, yeah, there are strange demonic things out there. I don't understand what exactly they are, but
well, you know, when you're dealing with this level of cruelty, of evil, I'm sorry, you know, that your family was involved in. Of course, they're serving something very, very dark. And whatever it is, you know, and these things, you know, these negative entities, the lower vibrational they are, the more inclined they are to show themselves, not because they want to, but because their frequency is so dense. It's like a heavier, you know, so it's easier to see them, although they're very clever, you know, they know exactly how to move and what have you. But it doesn't surprise me at all to know that stuff like that is present in your family. But that's really, as you say, you know, and again, I love how you've been able to have these moments outside of your body and birth. Now, this is the second near-death experience you're talking about. And I find it fascinating listening to you when you speak about that, because it makes such perfect sense. You know, obviously they knew how to bring you back. We know that from many different survivors. They don't just let you die. Death is not an escape at all. They know exactly how to bring you back. Yeah. So, but I love the fact that you, again, were able to take however long it was outside of your body and reflect without the mind. And I love what you say, because so true. The mind, your thoughts get in the way. And, you know, again, for everyone that is so anti the Eastern teachings, if there's one thing that the Eastern teachings do through meditation is teach you how to quiet your mind. And that's also why, I believe, they've demonized the Eastern teachings so much, is because they don't want you to understand the true path that you know we go through as human beings in the body, mind, spirit, to open up and understand the secrets of let's call it the universe that you were able to experience during that time. So just to have that reprieve out of your body, gather your senses, see what the hell was going on. I cannot imagine seeing that kind of scene that you described, that you had to witness. And it's amazing that they didn't actually see you, even though your spirit was, or your soul was, wandering around there. They didn't actually see you. I'm sure that because they would normally be quite adept at seeing that, right? But wow, what an experience. And again, as you say, coming into the body and having a shift in perception. It's like, I want to ask you one thing about that, though. it's like, it seems to me that even though you were in that time of moving around and in your soul, right, it seems you knew you had to come back, though, even though you were in non-physical form there. Is that correct? Am I reading the situation correctly?
Yeah, you are. Yeah. I felt like I had to go find my body. I
Yeah.
didn't want to be stuck there in that place, in that form. Yeah. So I definitely wanted to find a way out.
So
Yeah.
and what your spirit knew was that the only way out was through your body. Otherwise, you would have been stuck there. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know the answer to that, Chantel.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that.
It feels to me as well that it's like your soul knew your time wasn't up yet. Otherwise, you would have maybe seen the light or whatever, had an opportunity to leave this realm, right? Even in your soul. But it's like your soul knew, I got to find my body. I'm not done here yet.
No, and my body wasn't dead yet. It was just unconscious.
Right.
So, yeah, the heart was still beating in it. It was still going. So, yeah, had to go back and find it. Yeah.
It's fascinating. Well, I'm glad you found your body.
Yeah, me too.
I'm
Yeah.
glad your body's sitting here talking to us today, you and your body. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Well, I think I kind of interrupted you there a little bit, so I'm not
Well, that's
sure.
okay. That was really interesting information. I don't recall ever hearing about that. So that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was my
Tammy wants to
experience
know.
there.
Sorry, Tammy wants to know. Did you see your silver cord? Were you aware that there was a silver cord?
No, I don't remember seeing the silver cord. I've heard of this, and I've done things like it's called astral travel. I've done that before a little bit, and as well as remote viewing. But I don't remember seeing a silver cord. It is a really good question. I appreciate that. Yeah, but I don't remember that. But maybe I just don't remember. I don't know. Yeah, but I don't remember that. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, so that was my experience on the mountain and or in the mountain. And this is the time after I'd been selected for Pentagon level black operations. And so that was really one of the first big things I can remember being involved with was that guard detail after I'd been cleared for that kind of work. And then the next thing that I remember being made to do is we were involved with things like governmental assassinations, getting rid of people for the Central Intelligence Agency and for the Pentagon. And our orders would even come directly from the White House. And so I was made to be involved with an assassination of an individual in Kobe, Japan, back in 1997. I want to say it was August of 97, late August. And I was taken over to Japan where I was involved with, I was used as a shooter. I was placed on a rooftop and I was made to shoot somebody through a window in the building. And I was placed in a piece of mechanical equipment for that operation there in Japan to make that shot. And so that's a really long story. I'll go into it a little bit, but that one can take a while. But it is interesting, and there's a lot in the details that people should pay attention to because the devil tends to hide in the details with these things. And so, so I do go into details, and there's a reason for that because that helps other people to understand things in their own life or in research they're doing. So at that time, I was living in Nampa, Idaho, at my parents' house. This was in the summer of '97, and I was working at a restaurant. It was called Subway. No, Blimpies. That's what it was. It was Blimpies, and I worked at this Blimpies restaurant. And I was a young man then. I had turned 18, and I was working at Blimpies, and let me think now. I was working at Blimpies, and then I decided that I didn't want to work at Blimpies anymore, and I wanted to go and climb the Grand Teton and go on this big climbing adventure as a young man, because I was really into mountaineering and rock climbing. And so we were going to go on this big trip. So I quit working at the restaurant at Blimpies, and I said, I'm leaving for a month, and I'm just going to go do this stuff. And so I quit my job. But before I left, or when I left, I should say, my uncle had to talk to me because he had something planned for me that summer, and I had to be involved with it. This was my handler. And so when we went and we left on this climbing trip, I went with two friends of mine. I was made to stop by in Haley, Idaho, at my uncle's home and my handlers, because he wanted to talk to me before I left. And he told me I had to make this climbing trip short. I wasn't allowed to be gone for a month because we had some things we had to train for and an operation to prepare for. And so I ended up making that trip short, that climbing trip. We climbed the Grand, and then after that, I ended up getting a ride back to Idaho from my parents. They came to get me and my buddy, one of my other buddies, because my other buddy, he had gotten really drunk at the trailhead, and he started getting violent and smashing his head against his car steering wheel and stuff like that. And I looked at it as an opportunity, because I'd been told you have to get back to Idaho. You're not allowed to stay on this big trip. And so I looked at that as my opportunity, and I said, okay, I got to go. You're out of your mind. I don't know what your problem is. And I just packed up and left. I just started walking out of the woods and just hiking out. And my other buddy, he saw me doing this, and he came with me. And so I feel bad about that forever, like leaving my buddy there. And just, I mean, he was acting like an ass, but I don't know that we should have just left him there. But I was supposed to find a way to cut the trip short. And so I did. And then I went back to Idaho. My parents came and got us, and they took us back over to Idaho. And I was living with them, and I got a job at a place called Noodles. It's this restaurant. And I was going to be a pizza cook. I was taking over for one of my buddies because he wanted to quit and go work somewhere else. So he needed someone to replace him. So I started working in Noodles. Well, in Noodles, I was going to work in Nampa, but they had a restaurant in Boise where they wanted you to do your training for working at the restaurant. So I would actually, during my 2 weeks of training, I would drive over to Boise, and I would go to my training for working at the restaurant. And then after that, I would go up into the mountains there outside of Boise in my Volkswagen van. I had this old 66 van. It was a beautiful van. I wish I still had it, but I'd drive my van up into the mountains, and we would work on our pendulum swing, because we were going to use what's called the pendulum swing on this operation in Japan in the assassination of Masaru Takumi. And so we had to train for that, and we would go up into the mountains with my uncle. He told me I had to go after working at Noodles. I was to go up this canyon and meet him up there, and we would practice our pendulum swing. And another individual that was involved with this, her name was Kat. That's what I know her as. And she was this European gal who was also a trauma-based mind slave. And my uncle would use her as well. And so me and Kat and my uncle, we would all train for this pendulum swing up in this canyon. And that's what I was doing after work. Well, I got it into my head because it was programmed into my head. They programmed me one night that I was to go to the Boise airport and start reading my Bible. And I was just supposed to sit there in the waiting area and read my Bible. And this is actually what led me into this memory, because when I first started to remember this, I was like, why did I go to the Boise airport and read from my Bible? That is, I mean, such a strange thing to do. And so but that's what I would do, is I would go there and I would sit down and I would read my Bible. And that's not all that I was doing. And so I would go to work. I can remember going to work at Noodles and doing my training. And then I went from there and I left work and I drove to the Boise airport and I went inside and I sat down and I just read from my Bible. And then when I felt like I'd read enough, I had to use the restroom, and I got up and I walked over to the restroom and I used the restroom. And when I came out, there was these two seats right there and this planter thing with a tabletop on it. And I sat down and there was this plane ticket sitting there. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Why is there a plane ticket sitting here? And so I picked it up and I looked at it after a while. I let it sit there for probably 10, 15 minutes in case anyone came to get it. And then I just picked it up and I was like, oh, well, it's expired, but I'll still keep it, I thought to myself. And then I drove home. And on that day, let me think now. This first time that I went there, I apologize. I had not gone to work and then gone to the Boise airport. I had gone to a family event at a church is what had happened. I'd gone to a family event at a church. And then the second time that I went to the Boise airport was after work. So I had been to a church event with my family over there in the Boise area. And then I went to the Boise airport to read from my Bible. And then I went home after that with this plane ticket. And that was what my uncle wanted me to bring back for him, because he had programmed me to go through that process of going to the Boise airport, reading from my Bible, and then giving him the ticket and getting that ticket. And so he was really happy that I'd done all that. My family, when I got back to the house, they were like, where have you been? Because everyone had come back from that church event before. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people had come back before I got back. And they were like, where did you go? And I told them I went to the Boise airport to read from my Bible. And they were somewhat confused, but then I told them how peaceful it was and how nice, and that made sense to them. But yeah, I had gone there specifically for a reason, because the next time that I went to do this, it was when I was working at Noodles doing my training. And after work, it was my last day of working at Noodles at doing my training in Boise. And then I went to the airport and I brought a change of clothes for myself, because I was wearing these greasy pizza clothes from working in the pizza kitchen at this Italian restaurant. And I smelled like Italian food. I still love Italian food, but I changed my clothes because I had a Volkswagen van. And so I just stored all my clothes in there, and then I closed the curtains and I changed into some nice slacks, a nice button-up shirt. I had these sunglasses that were round. They looked like John Lennon's, and they were red. And I was supposed to be wearing those. I went through Rose programming. It has something to do with Rose programming. I don't quite understand all that fully. I know that I've been through that. I don't quite understand it entirely. But you looked at the world through a rose-covered lens, essentially.
Rose-tinted lenses.
Rose-tinted lenses.
What were they sending you to the airport for, though? I mean, there must have been a reason. Do you remember? Did it come back to you?
Yeah, so I changed my clothes, and then I grabbed my Bible, and I walked over, and I went in the airport, and I sat down in the waiting area, and I just started to read from my Bible. And then after an unknown amount of time, my uncle came, and he was meeting me there. And he was very glad to see me. And he was with another individual that I didn't recognize. And this man was a luggage handler. He handled the luggage at the luggage department. And my uncle told me I had to go with him. And so I went with this man, and we took some ways to get to the luggage area. It seems to me like it was back ways in some way. I'm not even entirely sure. And we got to the luggage area, and then there was this other guy in the luggage area who worked for this guy. So this guy was like the boss man down there, and there was two of them. And we had to load up all of our luggage because we would store our gear for CIA operations there at the Boise airport, because the Boise airport, the people who were running it were compromised by the agency, and they were able to utilize that facility in order to store our gear for operations like this. And so we had to load up all of our gear. We had comms gear. We had things like even down to clothes and boots. And it was all transported in these hard cases, like a Pelican case, I want to say is what they're called, these black cases. And so we had to load all that stuff up and take it out to our plane because we were leaving from there. I would like to add that the Boise airport has a military base right there attached to it called McGowan. This is, I want to say, Army National Guard, something like that. I haven't been there for quite a while. I'm not sure what it is now, but it's this military installation right there next to it, McGowan Field. And so we were going to take off in a plane, and we were headed to Japan, Chantel, is what I was doing at the airport. And we started loading up our gear. Well, these two guys, my uncle, he had to go around and do some kind of paperwork or something for our plane. And then these two guys, I was supposed to help them load luggage. And so I was helping them load luggage, and the one guy was smoking cigarettes, and the other guy is Minion. He's like to smoke too, but he didn't have any that day. So he started bumming them from this guy. And then I bummed one, and that was fine. But the second time this happened, he got really pissed because everyone was smoking all of his cigarettes. And he had an understanding of who I was. He knew that I was a mind slave because he was involved in the network there in the valley, in that area. And so he got really pissed when I asked for another one, a second one, and he wouldn't give me a cigarette. He ripped open my shirt. He took open my shirt, and he told the other guy that I was a mind slave, that I was a CIA mind slave, and he said he could torture me and burn me, and it wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't feel it. I wouldn't scream. I would just stand there, and that's exactly what happened. He opened up my shirt and then pulled it out of his way, and he took his cigarette and he just started to burn it into my chest.
No.
Yeah, and he did that on my chest right here, and I have a scar where he did it. And so he burned it right into me. And after I don't know how long, it was like he realized what he had done all of a sudden. Like, oh my, what have I done? Because you don't do stuff like that in the project. That's a very big mistake on his part. And so he told me just to button my shirt back up, and we got loaded up, and they put me on the cart where you'd have the luggage on the back. They were pulling one of those, they had one of those things with the carts on it behind it, and we loaded up all our stuff, and they loaded me up with all the luggage, and then they hauled me out with the luggage to the plane. And then the plane, it was big. It was a good sized plane, military aircraft. And I'm not sure exactly what it was. I wish I could remember that more clearly. But I remember my uncle came out of the plane and yelled at me. He wanted me to go inside and get ready for the flight. And then he told the two luggage guys what they were supposed to do, and how they were supposed to load stuff, because he wanted it loaded a certain way. And So I went in the plane, and Kat was in the plane, and the two pilots were in the plane, and I went in and was just hanging out with Kat for a minute, and then my uncle came in, and he was talking for a minute. He was all coked up. He liked to do cocaine a lot, and so he was all coked up on cocaine, but he saw that I had this stain on my shirt, this big stain from the guy burning me, because I was wearing this shirt and it just bled right through with this stuff. And he got really pissed, and he was like, "What happened to you? What in the hell is that?" And I just told him, the guy outside, he burned me with his cigarette. And my uncle got pissed. Oh my God, did he get pissed? And he just went tearing out of there, and he went down there and he started chewing that guy a new ass, just tear it into him. And he told Kat before he took off, take care of me. And so she bandaged me up, and they put something on it to make it scar less. They couldn't get rid of it entirely, but it scarred less than it would have if they hadn't have treated it. And so, but there's a scar there. That's one of the scars I found remembering all this stuff. And so she bandaged it up. My uncle got done chewing their ass, and then he came back in the plane. We got ready to fly. He gave me drugs. He gave me the blue drug. That's the one that makes you sleep. We always called them potions. They wanted me just to fall asleep. And so I was put to sleep with the blue potion. And then I can remember we were sitting backward. It's not like on a normal plane. We were sitting backward on the plane, and I was looking out at Boise as we were taking off. And then I was just gone, just out. You couldn't fight it when that stuff settled in, man. It was over. And then I was asleep for almost the whole flight. I woke up at one point during the flight. I don't know that I want to talk about that a whole lot. That was pretty awful, waking up and seeing what was happening. There was bad stuff happening on the plane. My uncle was basically raping Kat, and I yelled at him and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And he said he was programming her, and yeah, it was all very violent. And then he made me go back to sleep, gave me more drugs, and then I can remember waking up just in the back of the plane, and the engines weren't on and nothing was going on. It was quieter, and I was just sitting in this plane, and I could hear people, and there was this window, and I can remember looking out and seeing these people, and they were shorter people, and it didn't look like I was in America anymore. And they looked up. One of them looked up at me. He's awake. And my uncle, he was out there, and he came right up inside. He saw that I was awake, and he started talking to me. And he fed me more drugs. Kat wasn't there anymore at that time. She was gone. She had to go set up for us in the city. It was her job to set up the pendulum swing and the shoot nest site. All these things were compartmentalized. All these operations are compartmentalized so that no one person is in charge of doing one thing. And so she was gone setting stuff up, and my uncle, he gave me more drugs to wake me up, and then went out of the plane, and they smuggled me through the airport. The airport there wasn't controlled by the CIA, so we had to be really careful. And then they got me through the airport, and then I was just sitting in the airport in Japan reading from my Bible again. And then my uncle came and he got me, and he took me to we had a van there waiting for us, this vehicle. And we went out to our vehicle, and we got in our vehicle, and we drove around the airport and loaded up our stuff. And then after that, we left, and we went to a building there by the ocean front, right there outside Kobe, I want to say, or in Kobe. And there was this oceanfront area with all these big warehouses. And we went to one that was going to be destroyed. It was going to be demolished. And so it was mostly empty. and no one would find us there. And so we just went in there with our van, and we had to set up all of our gear. And so we went in, and we just started setting up our van with all of our comms gear and all that kind of stuff. And we'd take the Black Pelican cases after we took stuff out of it to load into the van, and we'd hide it in the back of the warehouse because we didn't think anyone would find it there. I was just doing what I was told. I was told this is where you're going to go put it. And then I can remember eating a couple MREs. My uncle, he was going to go into the city and meet with Kat that night. And so I just had to eat MREs. He was going to go have a nice dinner there in Japan, and I just ate those damn MREs, and I just ate them. It was like, this is what a soldier does. And so I just sat there and ate my MREs, and then he put me to sleep. He gave me more of the blue drug, the blue potion, and I was just put out. I can remember sleeping in the front of the van. And then the next thing I could remember was waking up in some alley, in some city somewhere. I was there in Kobe, and I just woke up and I could hear my uncle in the back of the van, and he was talking over the comms, and he was talking to Kat. And then we had different people in Japan that were working with us too, that were in on this whole thing. See, Masaru Takumi, the CIA wanted him dead because he was inadvertently involved with the gassing of the Tokyo subway system. That's something I didn't tell you about. That's why they wanted him dead, was because he was involved with the gassing of the Tokyo subway system, because his mistress was getting money from him, and then she was giving it to her brother, Hideki Seijo, who was this guy involved in the music industry. And then Hideki Seijo was given it to the cult, the Aum Shinrikyo cult. And that's how they were getting money funneled to them from the Yamaguchi Gumi gang. I'm probably butchering that name, but that's what I know it as, so I apologize. But the Yamaguchi Gumi Yakuza, that's who Masaru Takumi was involved with. He was second in command, I want to say. He was in charge of, I believe, their finances or something like that. And so he was giving money to his mistress because Hideki Seijo would ask for money, and then he would take that money, he would give it to the cult. Well, the cult used that money to buy the sarin gas that they used to gas the Tokyo subway system in March of 1995. And so the gas itself was sold to the cult by the Pentagon. The Pentagon is who sold that sarin gas to the cult. You can't just go to 7-Eleven or something, a gas station, and buy sarin gas. You got to find someone who's got it. Well, it was sold to the cult by the CIA. The cult itself was a CIA asset, and the CIA had created, in conjunction with others, that cult, and those were mind slaves, trauma-based mind slaves that were at the head of that cult. There was a lot of MK Ultra monarch programming going on within that cult. And so the whole thing is this huge web. And so the CIA wanted Takumi dead because he was a trail of evidence back to the agency for the gassing of the Tokyo subway system. So that's why, that's why I was there in the city, was because I was going to be involved with the assassination of Masaru Takumi. Now, this is what I had been told.
So basically, it was the assassination of Takumi was a CIA operation because they were selling that cult. Well, they were getting the gas from the CIA, basically.
And the CIA was involved with programming the cult.
Yeah. And so they had to kind of put a stop. God, how disgusting.
It's terrible, but there's more. Okay, Chantel, the CIA had been following him around for years, and they had been wanting to kill him. It's not as easy as people think to just go and kill somebody and have it all covered up perfectly. And so they've been following him around, watching him. They'll do this. They'll watch you for years before they finally get you. And so they've been watching him. Well, there was another gang. Oh, I don't want to butcher the name. I want to say Nagano Kai or Nakano Kai. There was this other breakaway gang from the Yamaguchi Gume who also wanted Takumi dead because there's always this gang warfare stuff going on.
Right.
And so this Nagano Kai, or however I would say that, I don't have it written down here in front of me. They wanted Takumi dead, but they were terrified of him. They wanted to make sure that he was dead. And so they came to the CIA and they asked the CIA to help them get rid of him. We're gonna try to kill Takumi. We're gonna kill Takumi, but we want you to be there to guarantee Takumi dies in this. And so I was being brought in as a shooter, and he had 4 different individuals that were going to attack him on the ground. He was going to be at a tea house that morning, and they were going to come in with 4 different guys from this other gang, this rival gang, and they were going to shoot him. They were there to shoot him, all 4 of them, and then I was supposed to hit him from the rooftop. Now, this was what the narrative was. I don't know who I actually shot because all that shit went down, and I can remember being taken up to this rooftop. We did the pendulum jump. We moved from one part of the building to another. After I'd woken up in the alley, I was taken up on the building, put in this piece of mechanical equipment, and they'd already had my rifle set up there for me. I didn't have to take it up there. It was all set up for me. They put me in this piece of mechanical equipment with my weapon, and then the next morning I was woken up, and when everything went down, I was made to fire my shot. And I don't know if I hit Takumi or if I hit, I believe his name is Hiroshi Harai, because there was an innocent bystander that was also hit by a bullet. And so I don't know it, because my uncle told me later that I hadn't killed Masaru Takumi. That would be a couple years later. He would tell me that in another operation. He said, "No, you killed a dentist. You're a murderer. Look what you did. You shot this other guy."
No.
Yeah.
No, you cannot believe him, though, surely, because you have to know that was gaslighting 101. I mean, the fact that, what is your feel? I mean, if you go back to that time, I mean, did you fire 1 shot? Did you fire 2 shots? Was there another sniper from across the whatever plaza where
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. It's also compartmentalized. I didn't know what else was going on. I was brought in to aim. Yeah.
I think your uncle was taking a fat chance there.
Yeah.
They're so gross.
Yeah, but it's a mind bender for you. Yeah, you just always wonder. You never know. And so I was made to fire, and I shot a fellow right as he was being attacked. See, I could hear over the comms. It was weird because at first it didn't go down. You could hear chatter. It wasn't going down. They were stopped at the door. It wasn't going to happen. Oh my God, they're moving. They're going in. It's going down. And then I was made to shoot. Now, right after I shot 1 shot, I was programmed to pass out because a sniper will often give themselves away by their movement after the shot, is why I believe they did that. And so I passed out. Yeah, right after that shot was fired, everything went black for me, and I just passed out. And I was woken up again because we were going to move in the daylight. They were moving, and we weren't supposed to move in the daylight. We were supposed to move after dark. And so I got woken up. They got me out of there. We got down from the rooftop, got me back in the van. Now, on the way down, we were just moving in daylight. And I was using those suction cup devices that we had to move through. At one point, I can remember, and I could see people in the building. And they could see me, some of them, Chantel. And there were these 2 guys who said, what the hell's going on? I couldn't understand what they were saying because they were talking to me in Japanese. But when I got past them, they opened their window and there's these guys yelling at me, hey, hey, and I couldn't understand them. And I said over the comms to my uncle, I said, oh no, there's two dudes right here at the window. And he said, tell him you're a window washer. And he told me how to say it in Japanese. And I told them I was a window washer. And then they didn't believe me. They weren't buying it. And so he said, just get down right now. And so we got down and got moving out of the country. And the city was being locked down somewhat. And we were driving, I can remember, and there was a roadblock. And that roadblock, I was really nervous because I was like, oh, they're looking for us. Like, they're actually looking for us. And my uncle, he wasn't worried at all. He was like, no, they're not looking for us, because they were looking for the other dudes that had shot the tea house up, I believe, that had come in on the ground. And some of those guys got away for quite a while. I read about it later, and they got away for quite a while. I think they caught them all by now. But yeah, bad deal. And so we got back to the airport, we got loaded up, and Kat wasn't there. And I was really worried. I was like, where's Kat? What's going on? She's not here, because we were going to take off and leave the country. And I was like, this is really bad. What's going on? Where's Kat? My uncle, he said, no, we're not waiting. We got to go. And so she had to get another flight out of the country. And we flew, we left, and we went back to Boise. And I don't remember much about that flight. I remember landing, and I can remember the one luggage handler that burned me with the cigarette. He wasn't there anymore. He was no longer employed there. And just the younger guy was there, and he didn't want to talk to me at all. And we got back over there. The weirdest thing about it all, Chantel, well, and one of the things that I found really interesting remembering all this is when I got back to my van after all this, I got in my van and I was leaving the airport parking area, and I pulled up to the booth where you pay your fee, and I handed my ticket to this individual, and they said, you have, like, it was a big amount of money you owe. And I was like, what are you talking about? I've only been here for a couple of hours. And they said, no, you've been here for like 3 days. And I was like, what are you talking about? How can I have been here for 3 days? And he said, look at your ticket. And I looked, and it said I'd been there for like three days or whatever. And I was like, oh my, okay. I couldn't understand what the hell, where I'd been, because my uncle had gone through the process of hypnotizing me. He'd hit me with the stun gun. He also gave me my favorite potions before he told me to go out and leave. He fed me mellow yellow.
What potions are we talking? Your favorite potions? What does that mean?
The drugs so that the CIA would give me.
Okay, so whichever ones you liked. So what were they actually giving you? I mean, I know you said they were giving you the blue juice to knock you out, but what potions would they give you? Was it like LSD? Was it mushrooms? What was it?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that.
Probably LSD.
That's a very good question. Yeah. So, but I was given yellow. We call it mellow yellow. And then I went back and got in my van. And yeah, when I was leaving, I had to pay for like 3 days worth of my van being parked. And I was so confused what the hell had happened. And then when I got back to my parents' house, I can remember I was told that that my work had been calling me, and that I was supposed to have gone into work. See, I was supposed to have gotten several days off of work because that was my last day of training in Boise at the restaurant. And then I was supposed to get a couple of days off before I started working again at the Nampa restaurant. Well, I was told when I got home that, well, the restaurant manager's been calling and trying to get you to come into work to cover other people's shifts and stuff. And they were like, what is going on? And then I was also told that I had been with this other guy, Chris, who was a friend of mine. And it was the alias of, you were off with Chris doing something. And Chris was the mind slave. And so he was in on the alibi. He was like, yeah, we went and did whatever, like for a couple days. And I was just so confused. I was like, I don't remember going with you anywhere. I don't know why I just paid for 3 days worth of parking. I don't understand why I should have just come home and then my work would have come. It was all so confusing, but it was all compartmentalized and shoved away. And so
that in itself must be so traumatic. You know, just to not know where 3 days have gone. You literally think you've been away a couple of hours and then you get confronted with this. I mean, that in itself is so traumatic. But I guess at this stage, this is normal for you, right? This is normal that these things happen in your family.
It's part of your life, missing time. Yeah. And so you just had missing time. Very strange. And so that was all very confusing. But that was the assassination of Masaru Takumi. And so when I started to remember those events, Chantel, it was a very bad deal because I started to remember those things. I want to say 2018 is when I really started to remember my experience in Japan. And then people in Japan, see, the cult by that time had was in prison over in Japan. This was, I believe, 2018. And they had a bunch of members of the cult, the head of the cult, in prison. And once I started to remember, they just started executing them. It was within like a month, they started killing them. And I was just like, oh my God, what is going on? And then Hideki Seijo had a heart attack and he died, which he did have heart trouble. I mean, maybe all these things are complete coincidences, but I don't believe so. I don't believe it was, because everybody started to die.
Do you think that you know what I find interesting? Because one of my other guests as well, he's actually Montauk survivor, Chris Latera, actually spoke about as well the minute, because out of his group, he was the first one to start getting memories. And when he started remembering and started asking questions, because his mother was the one who sold him to the CIA when he was a little kid. And then when he started asking questions, that's when they started targeting not only him, but his entire group of guys that were in the project together. Then they tried to, there were several attempts on their lives. They were arrested them and their businesses, they lost their money, like overnight, everything gone. You know, the usual CIA tactics, right? The alphabet boys. Yeah. So it's just interesting that what you're saying now, because I think, you know, it's like what you're saying, as you started getting your memories back, that's when they started taking the cult out, right, in Japan. So it's like they don't want other people remembering, because I'm sure they would have all then, they would base you starting to remember, then also recognize that the others will probably start regaining their memories as well, right? And then they start doing damage control before the damage is actually done.
Yeah. Yeah. They are swift. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's hard. It's a bad deal. Yeah. So that was my involvement in Japan. I was flown over there and made to be involved with that. So that was a really bad deal.
Speaking about the Japanese, one doesn't hear much about them in politics. I would love to know, I mean, from what you're saying now, you know, about the, what was his name? Masaru. I know the Takumi, right?
Takumi.
These guys are obviously linked to the alphabet boys as well, right? The Japanese. How
That was
far?
Sudo's mistress.
What was
But,
she?
you know, I
Was
was
she
told,
Japanese? Was she Japanese or
yeah, she was. Yeah.
but she was she like a spy, a honeypot?
I think you could call her a honeypot because she was placed there by the agency to be close to him as far
Right.
as Kumi goes. Yeah. So I suppose you could call her that. You know, it's all a big web that they are able to spin. So, yeah. Yeah, very bad deal. But very bad deal.
That's a terrible deal. And
Now,
especially Japan, we don't hear, as I say, we don't hear much about the Japanese when it comes to politics, mind control, their involvement in this whole.
no, and they're
Um,
starting to really wake up to it, though, which is really interesting, Chantel. I do try to communicate with people in Japan as much as I'm able. You're able to use Google Translate and stuff like that. So I'll do posts that are in Japanese. The translation's not always perfect, but I'm trying. And over in that country, I've observed anyway that you have a lot of folks that are what are called targeted individuals that are targeted by government. They are gang stalked. They go through things like that, technological harassment, which is interesting. That's too bad, but it's interesting. And so there's people I believe in Japan that are trying to understand this. From what I've heard from people in Japan, they don't quite understand all of the mind control stuff. And so I don't know.
right.
We'll see what the future holds for the people of Japan. Yeah, God bless them. They're wonderful people, very kind, respectful,
Yeah.
good people. I feel terrible about what I was made to be involved with. I just feel awful. And so it tears my heart away to know this stuff about what the CIA did to the people of Japan and not be able to try to communicate that with them. I've even called, I tried calling a police prefecture over there in Kobe to talk to them about this. And it's just so difficult because of the language barrier. You know, you're like, does anyone speak English at all? And yeah, no, I wasn't able to get a hold of anyone that spoke any English. And so I don't like to give too much of that kind of information away, but I do try to reach out to folks like that because it's a terrible thing what the United States government did to those people. So
I think, absolutely, we think about Hiroshima and we think, what the real causes of the war was, and it's really not what we've been led to believe. We understand that really the Allies have been the aggressors all the time, actually, and that the ones we think we the good guys have really turned out to we are not the good guys at all. At all. You're looking at the movies, not at all. I mean, this is actually quite shocking to
yeah, it's
realize, and then you wonder why other nations, I mean, look, as a South African, I understand why the African people do not like us whites. I can understand that. We've had our history of apartheid is recent, and it's still in many ways the wounds are open. This has also been going on in America and other countries, Europe for sure, since forever. And it's so clandestine there. It's so well hidden. The debauchery is so well hidden. It's so easy for the European Caucasian to make Africans seem like they are the crazy ones, the ones who are eating babies and nonsense like that. I mean, that hardly happens here. I mean, I know there's witchcraft and stuff and there's muti and stuff going on. Yes, for sure. There's that going on, but you do not hear about people cannibalizing their own children here. I mean, there is nothing more debauched than that. I'm sorry, that is like on another level, disgusting. But it's so interesting, and I'm loving actually seeing how the Epstein files are cracking open so many dark and dodgy holes, because it's not about Epstein. We know that he was just the face, right? It's about everyone else involved, and they all have had some kind of a part to play in this disgusting underworld. I don't know. What's your take on that?
Yeah, there's a whole underworld. That's a good way to describe it. It is an underworld. But it's a world of it's not under. It's under. It's around. It's everywhere. Yeah, yeah. So the stuff that we've been talking about, it's institutionalized. That's one way I've heard people start to describe it, and I've always thought of it that way, I suppose, or since I started to really remember and understand it. It is very institutionalized, and it's in our corporations, these kinds of things. It's in our governments. It's in Hollywood. It's in media. It's anywhere that you have a lot of money and power, and there are these evil cults that have been running for centuries. Like you talked about vampires and stuff. That was really interesting. But these things have been going on for a very long time, and they've been building power, and they've been building wealth, and they've been building control. And so,
Right.
yeah, it's
Absolutely.
something people are going to have to wake up to, I'm afraid, because we have to see it for what it is. And unless we see it, then we can't stop it. And so
Exactly.
that's a big part of my work, is just bringing it to conscious awareness for people,
And that's
because
what I love. It takes a lot of bravery. And I see somebody like being very straightforward. Why aren't you dead? Well, how can we answer why somebody is or isn't dead? It doesn't mean their lives have not been attempted. But really, at the end of the day, if it be God's will that you are around, and you are around. Unfortunately, there seems to be so many people that think, well, if you're alive and not dead, then you're a CIA operative and you're a gatekeeper and controlled opposition. That's also nonsense.
they've tried to kill me several times.
Yeah,
They
absolutely. I have no
have.
doubt.
But I used to do for them what they want to do to me. And I've been able to see them coming when they tried to do it. They tried,
Yeah.
I know, on 4 separate occasions.
Mm.
And so that's a good question. But also, when you reach a certain vocal point, it makes it harder to kill them. So that's
Yeah,
a great question, but it's your job as a survivor to always be working to prevent that. And
exactly.
by speaking out and being as loud as humanly possible, it makes it harder to kill you, because if they do, everyone's going to say, well, wait a minute, that guy was talking about this and that guy was talking about that. And this
Yeah.
guy has a book out that talks about this. And so it makes it harder for them. So it's a great question, but you have to learn to think outside the box of the narrative of Hollywood. Sorry.
Yeah. It's so true. And it's and you're right about that, because I think people, there are so many survivors out there at the moment who are speaking up, and it's getting a lot harder to unalive people at this point in time, I think, because so many people are actually speaking up. It was a lot easier 10 or 15 years ago to snuff someone out, when you weren't necessarily speaking out. Like, we have too many platforms right now with survivors, sharing their stories as well. So it's not as easy as what it was, I don't think. But, at the end of the day, if it's your soul's purpose to be here and you are here by divine design, then no one and nothing is going to change that. You are here through God's desire and creation. So, yeah.
Yeah, well said. The guy who, the next chapter in my book, my journal memories, it's called Loose Ends. And it's about that guy who burned me with the cigarette. He was the luggage handler. because we went and we killed him. We got rid of him after this event. So I'd been home for a few months, and then I was made to be involved with killing that individual.
Was that because of what he did to you?
Yes, that was because of what he did to me and because he was such a difficult individual to handle. And so we just went over to his house. We were dressed as Mormon missionaries, and I was with another mind slave and this mind slave's father. I was with David Cahoon was his name. He's also a trauma-based mind slave. And then his father, Patrick Cahoon, he's involved with the Central Intelligence Agency. He sold both of his sons into the project. And who else was there? My grandfather was there. So Patrick Cahoon and my grandfather took David and I over there, and we got rid of that guy. And that guy, he had a daughter too. He actually had a little girl with a girl that I had been dating when I worked at Heirlooms, that furniture store, that year that I was cleared by Cheney for Pentagon level black operations. I was dating this gal, and he had ended up dating her after I broke up with her, or she broke up with me, I should say. And they had a kid together, and that kid was also there at the house when we came to get him. And that kid's not around anymore either. The CIA has no mercy. There's mercy in how you kill, and there was no the only mercy was in doing it as fast as you could. And so we.
Why did they take the child out?
Because no one was even supposed to know that my ex-girlfriend had this child. This was a child that he was raising to be in the network and to be in the project and to be used for various things. And so he was raising her, and it was all supposed to be on the down low. Ariane wasn't even allowed to remember these things, I don't believe. And so the child, when he died, she died.
How old was she?
I don't know. Not very old. Maybe a year old. I don't know. Not very old, Chantel.
Well, the merciful bit there is that she didn't go through the life path that he had plotted out for her. I mean, I don't think the intention was with taking her out was any good intention, but the poor child, if she had to go through that kind of experience, no.
So I'm not going to go into that a whole lot. And then my family was also really Mormon. So like I said, we went over to get rid of that guy. We were dressed as Mormons. Well, we were really involved with Mormonism, and there's a lot of satanic people in Mormonism and CIA people in Mormonism, and they go hand in hand. And so the next chapter, our journaled memory, would be the left-hand path. And that is a long story. We've been talking for 2 hours. If I was to share the left-hand path, we'd be here for 3.
We'll leave that for, I know that's a very interesting one because we've kind of touched on that, but I also know, as you say, we've been here for 2 hours, and I think it takes a lot out of you. Yeah. And we will definitely leave that for about 2 weeks' time? Are we back in 2 weeks' time with you again?
That would work for me, Chantel.
Yeah. Wow. JR, thank you again. I mean, I'm just saying, I listen to you and I just send you so much love. And
thank you.
Wow. It is so crazy to hear the stories, and thank you. It's, I can understand why people ask the questions they do, because I think the majority of people have no understanding of what being a CIA operative actually entails, right?
Mhm.
And it's not just that, it's the families you're born into. You know, it's not just deciding at the end of school, okay, I'm 18 years old, I feel like joining the CIA, and then going to CIA college. I don't know, maybe for some people that might be. But you know, it's very gruesome. It's very bloodthirsty. The CIA is basically the hit squad for the government. That's the way I see it. If we're looking also what's happened in France lately, I think 14 Freemasons were arrested for murder in France because they from one of the lodges, from one of the Freemason lodges, they were literally being used as the hit squad.
Mm.
And 14 guys have now being arrested for that. I love the fact that so much is happening around the world to slowly but surely bring these monsters to justice. I really, really, really do. I am so grateful to people like you who will put your life on the line every single day to share your story. I know you've got kids as well and a wife. So I know it can't be easy for them to have their dad go through this every day as well. But thank you, JR. Thank you. Really, really thank you.
Yeah,
That's
thank
all.
you, Chantel.
Just thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you next week again. We'll talk about the left-hand path. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a teaser. Yeah. JR was actually supposed to marry Nikki Hilton. Or you were engaged to Nikki Hilton for a while as well. You were supposed to, yeah. And that, of course, has not happened. She's married to someone else, but that'll be a very interesting next chapter to chat with you about. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantel.
Is there anything you want to share in closing, or any shows you're on, anything you just want to speak, you know, tell people where you're at? Anything?
Yeah, they can find my book. I have a website for anyone who doesn't know. It's called MormonMonarch.com. And you can go there and you can find all my journaled memories there. They're free. You don't have to pay for them. You can just read them. That's intentional. I want this information out there. I feel like people should know it. Pay attention to the details. The devil does hide in the details. And
Yeah.
so that's why I go through a lot of details. And then you can buy my book if you prefer a book form. Everything that's in my book is available on my website for free. You don't have to buy my book. I'm not asking you to. I like books, and so I have a copy of my book because I put it together because I like books, and books are a good way to carry on information for a very long time, as well as a good way to share information. So you can pick that up if you want.
Well, I think buying your book is a wonderful way for our survivors to actually, for our viewers to actually support the survivors. So if there's there is JR's book as well, so that get a copy of the book.
Yeah, and it's on sale right now. I think it's like $23, 23 US dollars. And so I try to put it on sale. It's available all month for that price. And so you can go and pick it up. And so I try to put it on sale, just make it more economical when I can. So you can pick that up if you want to. And then I just wanted to say thank you. I do appreciate the questions, and I appreciate your viewers. I understand that people have questions, and I have questions too that I can't always get answers for. But I'm still working at it, and yeah, thank you to everyone. So I really appreciate all of you, and I appreciate you, Chantel. Thank you for your time. And
thank you very much. And I would love maybe one of the shows we could do a second half of Q&A. Are you good with that?
Yeah, we could do something like that.
I think a lot of people have some questions for you, so we'll do that as a member show. But we can chat about that afterwards. and see when we want to do that. Thank you, everybody. And yes, we certainly honor you and admire your bravery. That's for sure. And look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time again, JR. Take care of you.
Thank you, Chantel.
Take care, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. And thank you, as always, for supporting our survivors in this community. We really do appreciate you. God bless you all. Have a beautiful week. And I will see you all tomorrow with Miles Johnston at 3 o'clock South African time. I don't know what time that is for you, okay? Wherever in the world you are, SAST or CAT, South African Standard Time or Central African Time, 3 o'clock with Miles Johnston. Take care, everybody. Up until then, au revoir. And yeah, just be cool, be kind, be yogi. Bye, everybody. Mwah.